For 12 years, a former Navy SEAL believed his little niece was lost in a ferry fire. Then his German shepherd heard a girl whistle a song only his sister once knew. The dog froze in the middle of a summer fair, trembling like he had found a ghost from the past. Seconds later, he pulled that girl away from a runaway truck. When her sleeve tore, the SEAL saw the scar of the child everyone thought was gone forever. But the town's beloved hero had buried more than one secret beneath the ashes. Stay until the end. Tell us where you're watching from. Leave your thoughts. And please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. North Star Bay woke early in summer. Not loudly, not all at once. The little lakeside town opened its eyes the way an old woman opened curtains. Slowly, carefully, with a soft complaint in its bones and sunlight already waiting outside. By 6 in the morning, the northern lake shone blue and clean beneath the wide Minnesota sky. White boats rocked along the docks. Wild bluebells grew in thick patches beside fence lines and mailbox posts. The bell of St. Miriam's Church rang across the water, bright and gentle, while the morning market filled the square with the smell of blueberry pies, hot coffee, fresh cedar planks, and lake wind. It was the kind of place people called peaceful because they did not know where to look for sorrow. Brennan Locke knew exactly where sorrow lived. It lived in the gap between two heartbeats when a phone rang and a man did not answer. It lived in the half-second before sleep, when memory put on the face of someone dead. It lived in bright towns that rebuilt their docks, painted their fences, hung flags above the streets, and pretended fire had not once climbed into the sky from the old ferry pier. Brennan lived a mile outside town in a cedar cabin facing Lake Wren, where the pine trees leaned toward the water like old priests listening to confession. At 44, he still carried the shape of a soldier. He was tall, a little over 6 feet, with broad shoulders made lean by discipline rather than vanity. His dark brown hair was cut short, practical, threaded with gray at the temples. A close shadow of beard often darkened his square jaw by afternoon, though he shaved when the town needed him presentable, which was almost never. His skin was light, but weathered by lake wind and old deployments. His eyes were gray-blue, steady and distant, the kind of eyes that made strangers lower their voices without knowing why. He had been a Navy SEAL once. People in North Star Bay said it with a certain hush, as if the title explained everything about him. It did not. It explained why he could fix a cracked hull in freezing rain, why he heard footsteps before others heard doors, why he never sat with his back to a room. It did not explain why kindness made him uncomfortable. It did not explain why, every year on the anniversary of the ferry fire, he placed his phone face down and left it that way until morning. Beside him that summer morning walked Ridge. Ridge was a 5-year-old German shepherd with a yellow-black working line coat, amber eyes, and a body built like a promise kept through bad weather. One ear stood sharp and proud. The other had a small nick near the edge from a rescue training accident years earlier. Ridge was not a soft dog, not the kind who begged for attention from everyone with hands. He studied people first. He judged quietly. If approved, a person might receive one grave blink, which in Ridge's kingdom counted as affection. He had been trained for search and rescue before Brennan adopted him. Ridge knew how to follow scent across wet stone, how to sit still beside the injured, how to ignore shouting unless the shouting mattered. But lately, Brennan had begun to suspect Ridge knew other things too, things no training manual could explain. The dog knew when Brennan's memories turned dark. On those nights, Ridge did not whine. He simply came to the bedroom doorway, lay down across the threshold, and blocked the exit like a furry, inconvenient angel. "You're dramatic," Brennan often told him. Ridge usually answered with a slow blink that said humans were fragile creatures and should be supervised. That morning, Brennan only meant to pass through the Bluebell morning fair long enough to buy roofing nails, 2 hinge plates, and maybe a peach turnover if Mrs. Bell hadn't burned them again. He wore a faded navy work shirt, worn jeans, and brown boots stained with oil from the boats he repaired for half the town. Ridge padded at his left side, calm and alert. The town square looked almost impossibly alive. Children ran between flower stalls. Old men argued over fishing hooks beneath a striped awning. A fiddle player with a red face and white beard scraped out cheerful music near the fountain. Volunteers tied blue ribbons around lampposts, while a banner over Main Street read, "Welcome to Bluebell Morning Fair." Brennan hated crowds, not because he disliked people. He disliked the 1,000 small directions danger could come from when people moved without purpose. A child dropping a glass bottle, a truck backing up too fast, a stranger's hand disappearing inside a coat pocket. His mind counted exits before it counted faces. 5 minutes, he muttered to Ridge. Ridge's tail moved once, not quite agreement. Near the bakery table, a woman in her 60s named Marla Voss waved at him with a paper bag in one hand. Marla was short, round-faced, and always smelled of cinnamon and flour. She had silver hair pinned beneath a blue scarf and a laugh too loud for secrets. "Brennan Locke," she called. "You're walking like a man trying not to be seen. Again." "That's because I'm succeeding poorly," Brennan said. Marla held out a turnover. "Take this before you frighten the tourists." "I don't frighten tourists." "You look like a lighthouse keeper who lost an argument with thunder." Brennan almost smiled. Almost. Ridge accepted the corner of crust Marla offered, with the solemn dignity of a judge accepting evidence. Then the song came. Not from the fiddle, not from the church bell, not from any radio or speaker. 3 notes, soft, uneven, whistled by a child. Ridge stopped so abruptly, Brennan nearly stepped over him. The German shepherd's body went rigid, his ears lifted. His head turned toward the flower stalls at the far side of the square. Brennan felt the leash tighten. "Ridge?" The dog did not move forward. He did not bark. He did not growl. He lowered his head and trembled. That was what struck Brennan first. Not recognition, not alarm, but grief moving through the animal's body before Brennan understood why. Then the child whistled the 3 notes again. Brennan's hand went cold around the leash. He knew that tune. It was not a song, not truly. It was a private call, something his father had made up when Brennan and his younger sister Tessa were children running through the woods behind their old house. 3 notes to call the family dog home. Tessa had used it later with every stray creature she found, dogs, cats, one furious raccoon she insisted was misunderstood. Only 3 people had known that little call: Brennan, Tessa, and their father, who had been dead for 21 years. Across the square, a girl stood at a flower stall tying bluebells with twine. She looked about 13, slim and small for her age, with sun-browned light skin, a narrow face still soft with childhood, and bright hazel-green eyes that seemed too watchful when she looked up. Her hair was dark blonde, streaked lighter by summer, tied into a loose braid that had already begun falling apart around her cheeks. She wore an oversized yellow cardigan over a pale dress and scuffed canvas shoes. There was sweetness in her face, but not ease. She smiled at customers the way some children learn to smile when they had decided adults were less dangerous if kept comfortable. A hand-painted sign beside her read, "Penny Alder, Wildflower Bouquets, $4." Brennan stood frozen. Ridge took 1 step, then another. The girl looked up as if she had felt the dog's attention before she saw him. For a heartbeat, the fair seemed to dim around them. Fiddle music, Market chatter, children laughing, all of it became distant, as though the town had slipped under water. Ridge gave one low sound, not a bark, not a warning, a broken, questioning rumble. Penny's smile faded. "Hi," she said softly to the dog. "Do I know you?" Brennan's chest tightened. He moved closer before he could stop himself. "Where did you learn that whistle?" he asked. Penny blinked at him. Up close, she looked younger and older at the same time. There was a tiny smudge of flower pollen on her cheek. Her hands were quick and careful, the hands of a child used to making useful things out of fragile ones. "What whistle?" "The 3 notes." She glanced down, suddenly embarrassed. "I don't know." Brennan waited. Years of interrogation training taught him silence often opened doors words could not. Penny swallowed. "I just dream it sometimes." The answer hit him harder than it should have. What kind of dream? Penny looked past him toward the lake. Her face changed, not dramatically, but enough. A small shadow passed behind her eyes. "There's smoke," she whispered, "and water. And someone keeps saying my name, but it's not—" She stopped. "Not what?" Brennan asked. Penny pressed her lips together. Before she could answer, Ridge's head snapped toward the street. A delivery truck decorated with blue ribbons rolled downhill from the church road. At first, no one noticed anything wrong. The truck was part of the fair parade setup, its side painted with smiling blueberries and a wooden crate of flowers tied to the back. Then the driver's face appeared through the windshield, wide-eyed, terrified. The truck was not slowing. Someone screamed. The fiddle stopped. Penny stood directly beside the curb, frozen in that terrible way people freeze when danger arrives too fast for the body to believe in it. Brennan lunged, but Ridge moved first. The German shepherd sprang forward, not biting, not hurting. He caught the loose sleeve of Penny's cardigan gently but firmly in his teeth and yanked her backward. Penny stumbled into Brennan's arms as the truck roared past the exact spot where she had been standing. Flower buckets exploded across the pavement. Bluebells scattered like pieces of sky. The truck slammed into a stack of empty wooden crates near the fountain and shuddered to a stop. Men shouted. Marla dropped her paper bag. Somewhere, a child began crying. Brennan held Penny by the shoulders, feeling her tremble beneath his hands. "You hurt?" he asked. Penny shook her head, breathing too fast. Ridge stood between her and the street, body low, eyes locked on the truck as if daring it to try again. The driver climbed out, pale and shaking. "Brake line," he stammered. "It just went. I swear I tried." Brennan barely heard him. Penny's cardigan sleeve had torn when Ridge pulled her away. The fabric hung loose around her left wrist. And there, beneath the torn yellow cuff, Brennan saw the scar. Small, curved, a pale crescent mark just below the thumb. The world tilted. He had seen that scar before on a child barely old enough to run. His niece had gotten it after falling against a broken clay pot in Tessa's garden. Tessa had cried harder than the child did. Brennan had teased her gently, telling her the little girl would survive her first battle wound. Mara Locke, his niece, dead for 12 years, declared lost with her mother in the Ferry fire. Penny quickly pulled the sleeve down, as if trained to hide it. Brennan stared at her face, at the shape of her eyes, at something around the mouth that belonged to Tessa so clearly it felt cruel. "What is it?" Penny whispered. Brennan tried to answer. Nothing came. Ridge turned and looked up at him. The dog's amber eyes held no panic now, no confusion, only a grave certainty that made Brennan's blood run colder than fear. As the town rushed around them, as people lifted broken crates and checked the driver and gathered scattered flowers, Brennan stood in the summer sun with a rescued girl in front of him and a dead child's scar beneath her sleeve. By evening, North Star Bay had already begun polishing the incident into a story. A brake failure, a lucky dog, a girl saved, a miracle at the fair. People liked miracles better when they came without questions. Brennan did not. He returned to his cabin after sunset with Ridge walking beside him in silence. The lake glowed copper beneath the fading sky. Fireflies flickered near the grass. Somewhere across the water, music from the fair still floated weakly through the warm air. Inside the cabin, Brennan stood for a long time in the hallway. Then he opened the closet he had not touched in years. On the top shelf sat a metal storage box with a dented lid and a strip of masking tape across the front. Tessa. His sister had been 31 when the ferry burned. In Brennan's memory, she was always moving, laughing too quickly, talking with her hands, carrying injured birds in shoeboxes, arguing with him like a lawyer, and forgiving him like a saint who had terrible judgment. She had dark blonde hair, hazel green eyes, and a heart too soft for a world that punished softness first. Brennan set the box on the kitchen table. His hands, which had once steadied rifles in storms and pulled wounded men from surf, shook as he opened it. Inside were photographs, letters, a faded ribbon, a child's drawing of a dog, and one picture tucked into the back beneath a folded scarf. Tessa stood in a garden, smiling tiredly at the camera. In her arms was little Mara, 3 years old, cheeks round, eyes bright, one hand lifted as if waving at someone she trusted. Brennan brought the photo closer to the lamp. There it was, the crescent scar on the child's left wrist. Ridge sat beside his chair without a sound. Brennan looked toward the dark window, where his own reflection stared back like a man being summoned to trial after 12 years of hiding from the evidence. His niece had died in the fire. That was what the report said. That was what the town believed. That was what Brennan had forced himself to survive. So why had a 13-year-old flower girl in North Star Bay whistled Tessa's private call? Why had Ridge recognized her before Brennan did? And why did Penny Alder carry Mara Locke's scar? The morning after the Bluebell Morning Fair, North Star Bay looked too beautiful for suspicion. Sunlight poured over the lake in long golden sheets. Sailboats rocked gently along the docks. Blue ribbons still fluttered from lampposts, left over from the celebration, while crushed wildflowers lay drying in the cracks of Main Street where the runaway truck had scattered them the day before. By noon, the town had already chosen the version of the story it preferred. A brake line failed. A dog reacted quickly. A little girl was lucky. That was all. Brennan Locke knew better. Luck did not whistle a dead woman's private tune. Luck did not wear the scar of a child buried 12 years ago. And Ridge did not tremble for strangers. Brennan spent the morning repairing a fishing boat behind his cabin, though he could not remember tightening a single bolt. His hands moved out of habit, but his mind kept circling back to Penny Alder's face, the careful smile, the guarded eyes, the way she had pulled her sleeve down so quickly after Ridge tore it. Ridge lay near the dock, his yellow-black coat glowing in the sunlight. The 5-year-old German shepherd looked calm to anyone passing by, but Brennan saw the signs. The restless twitch of one ear, the slow lift of his nose whenever the wind shifted toward town, the refusal to sleep. "You're not going," Brennan said without looking up. Ridge blinked once. "I mean it." The dog stood. Brennan sighed. That was not an invitation. Ridge trotted toward the gravel road with the quiet certainty of a creature who had never once believed human decisions were final. Brennan followed him 10 minutes later, muttering things no church bell should have heard. Ridge did not head toward the woods or the docks. He moved through a narrow lane behind the bakery, past rows of bright summer gardens and white fences, until he reached a small house on Apple Row. It was the kind of house people painted on postcards, White clapboard walls, pale green shutters, a low porch with 2 wicker chairs. Behind it stretched a small apple orchard, its trees heavy with early fruit, their leaves trembling in the warm lake breeze. But Brennan noticed the windows first. Every one of them was locked. Not just shut, locked, latched. Some had thin wooden rods placed in the frames from the inside. A pretty house, he thought, could still be a cage if someone was afraid enough. Penny stood in the orchard with a basket of cut flowers against her hip. In daylight, away from the shock of the fair, she looked even younger. Her dark blonde braid hung loose over one shoulder, and the yellow cardigan had been replaced by a pale blue shirt with sleeves tugged down past her wrists despite the warmth. She moved among the trees with gentle purpose, cutting stems, checking leaves, pausing once to lift a fallen baby bird back into a low nest. Ridge stopped at the fence. He did not bark. He did not jump. He simply sat, watching her. Penny turned as if she felt him. A smile touched her mouth, small and real this time. "Hi, Ridge," she called softly. Brennan stiffened. He had not told her the dog's name. Penny seemed to realize it too. The smile vanished from her face. She glanced toward the house. "I heard someone say it yesterday." Maybe she had. Maybe she had not. Brennan rested one hand on the gate. "You all right after the accident?" Penny shrugged with the careful bravery of a child who did not want adults making decisions around her. "I've had worse days." That answer was too old for 13. Before Brennan could respond, the front door opened. Lydia Snow stepped onto the porch. She was 68, maybe a little older, tall and thin in a way that made her look like a candle burned down but not yet out. Her skin was pale and finely lined from northern winters. Silver-gray hair was pinned in a loose knot at the back of her head, though several strands had escaped around her cheeks. She wore a faded lavender blouse, a long gray skirt, and practical brown shoes dusted with garden soil. Her face was not unkind. That was what made Brennan pause. Lydia Snow had the wary softness of someone who had spent years guarding something precious and had grown tired of pretending the guarding was not love. "Penny," Lydia said. The girl lowered the basket. "I'm just talking to Mr. Locke." "I see that." Lydia's eyes moved to Brennan, then to Ridge. Something tightened in her mouth. Ridge rose slowly. The dog's amber eyes fixed on Lydia, but he did not growl. Instead, he took one step closer to the fence and lowered his head, almost like recognition. Lydia went pale. It lasted less than a second, but Brennan saw it. He had built a life out of seeing what people wished he would miss. "I didn't come to trouble her," Brennan said. "Trouble rarely announces itself honestly," Lydia answered. Her voice was quiet, controlled, and worn at the edges. There was education in it, maybe old music, maybe old grief. She stepped down from the porch and approached the gate, placing herself between Brennan and Penny with a movement so practiced it seemed older than the conversation. Penny looked embarrassed. "Lydia, he didn't do anything." "I know, sweetheart." But Lydia did not take her eyes off Brennan. That word stayed with him. Sweetheart. Not daughter, not child, not Penny even. A sheltering word, a careful word. "Yesterday scared her," Brennan said. "Yesterday scared everyone." "Not everyone hides it the same way." Lydia's expression sharpened. "You have a habit of speaking like a man who expects people to confess. I have a habit of noticing when people are afraid." "Then perhaps you should notice when a child has already had enough attention for 1 week." Penny's face flushed. "I'm not a child." Lydia turned, and her sternness softened immediately. "No, of course not." But Penny had already looked away. Brennan felt something shift in the air among them. Not accusation, not yet. A triangle of old fear, new anger, and a dog standing at the gate like a witness nobody had called. Then Ridge did something strange. He walked to the far end of the fence, where the orchard dipped toward a narrow footpath leading toward the lake. He lowered his nose to the ground and began to follow a scent along the grass. Halfway down the fence line, he stopped beside an old wooden post wrapped in climbing roses. He pawed once at the dirt. "Ridge," Brennan warned. The dog pawed again, more urgently. Penny walked toward him. "What is he doing?" "Being difficult," Brennan said, though his voice had lost its dryness. Ridge scraped away a thin layer of soil near the post. Something pale appeared beneath the dirt. Penny crouched before Lydia could stop her. It was a child's hair clip. Small, white, shaped like a daisy. The plastic had yellowed with age. Penny picked it up slowly. The color drained from Lydia's face. "I've seen this," Penny whispered. Lydia moved toward her. "Penny, in my dreams," the girl said. The orchard fell silent. Even the lake wind seemed to step back. Penny held the little daisy clip in her palm, as though it had weight far beyond plastic. Her lips parted. Her eyes filled not with memory exactly, but with the pain of something trying to become memory. "There was a woman," she whispered. "She smelled like smoke and lavender soap." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Brennan looked at her. Lydia turned away too late. The rehook landed inside him like a bell struck under water. Penny was not merely similar to someone lost. Some part of her remembered being carried through fire by a woman no one in North Star Bay was willing to name. Penny closed her fist around the clip. "Why would I dream about something buried in our yard?" Lydia did not answer. That was answer enough. Brennan stayed at the fence until Penny went inside. Lydia waited until the girl disappeared behind the locked front door before speaking. "You should leave this alone." "No." The word came out too fast, too hard. Lydia studied him, and for the first time he saw anger beneath her fear. "You think because you were trained to run toward danger, that makes you qualified to open every wound you find? I think that girl is living under a lie. Some lies are bandages. Some bandages rot into the skin." Lydia flinched. Brennan regretted it, but not enough to take it back. "Who is she?" he asked. "She is Penny Alder." That name doesn't answer anything. It answers what she needs. What does she need? Lydia's face tightened. A life. Brennan stepped closer to the gate. Ridge stood beside him, quiet but alert. "My sister died 12 years ago," Brennan said. "Her daughter died with her. That's what I was told. That's what was put in the reports. That's what this town buried." Lydia's eyes grew wet, but she did not blink. "There are children," she said slowly, "who survive only because adults agree to be called liars." The sentence moved through Brennan like cold water. He lowered his voice. "Who are you protecting her from?" Lydia looked past him, not at the lake, not at the road behind him, at something approaching from Apple Row. A black town car rolled to a stop beside the white fence. The driver stepped out first, a young man in sunglasses, then opened the rear door. Mayor Merritt Stone emerged with the easy grace of a man used to being welcomed before he spoke. He was 59, tall and silver-haired, with a polished build that made his tailored summer jacket look almost casual. His face was handsome in the controlled way of public men, clean-shaven, square-chinned, sun-touched, with smile lines placed exactly where voters like to see them. His eyes were pale gray, cool and observant. He wore a white shirt open at the collar, dark trousers, and expensive brown shoes that had never known garden mud. People in North Star Bay called him generous, a restorer, the man who rebuilt the ferry pier after the fire. He had the warmth of a lantern placed in a window. Brennan, however, had seen men use light as bait. "Mr. Locke," Merritt said, smiling, "I heard about Ridge's heroic moment yesterday. Whole town's talking." Ridge moved before Brennan did. The German shepherd stepped between Penny's house and Merritt Stone, shoulders rising, head low. This time he growled. It was not loud, it did not need to be. Merritt stopped at the gate. For one brief second his smile thinned. Then it returned. "Well," he said lightly, "that dog is sensitive, isn't he?" Lydia's hand gripped the fence post so hard her knuckles whitened. Brennan watched Merritt. "He usually is." Merritt looked down at Ridge, then back at Brennan. "Maybe he knows I was there that night." Brennan did not move. "What night?" Merritt's smile remained perfectly still. "The ferry fire, of course." He tilted his head as if discussing weather. "A terrible thing. Some memories never leave a town, do they?" Ridge growled again. From behind the front window, Penny appeared between the curtains, watching. Merritt noticed. He lifted one hand and waved gently. Penny did not wave back. Lydia stepped in front of the window. The mayor's smile did not change, but Brennan saw the calculation behind it. Merritt Stone had not come to comfort anyone. He had come to measure how much had been disturbed. After a few polite sentences about safety, repairs, and letting the poor girl rest, Merritt returned to his car. The town vehicle rolled away beneath the bright apple trees, leaving dust shining in the sunlight like gold powder over a grave. Lydia opened the gate just wide enough to let Brennan hear her clearly. "You cannot come here again without warning." "Lydia, no. Listen to me." Her voice shook now. "There are men who do not need guns to destroy a life. They have papers, offices, friends who owe them favors. They smile in photographs while other people disappear." Brennan's jaw tightened. "Is Merritt one of those men?" Lydia looked toward the locked house. "I have said too much." "You haven't said enough." But she was already retreating. Ridge refused to move until Brennan tugged the leash twice. That night, Brennan sat alone in his cabin, with every light off except the lamp above the kitchen table. Ridge lay near the door, awake, facing the road. Brennan tried to make the pieces fit. Penny's fear of the lake, the locked windows, the buried hair clip, Lydia's terror, Merritt's smooth little confession about being at the ferry fire. None of it formed a complete picture. It formed something worse, a shape behind fog, large enough to frighten him before he knew its name. At 11:43 p.m., his phone rang. Brennan looked at the screen. Unknown number. Ridge lifted his head. Brennan answered. "Locke." For a moment, only static breathed through the line. Then Lydia Snow's voice came through, thin and shaking. "If you want to know the truth about Penny," she whispered, "do not ask me." Brennan stood. "Lydia, where are you?" "Ask why the child's body from the ferry fire—" Her breath hitched. "Ask why it was never identified by DNA." Brennan's hand tightened around the phone. "Lydia?" A sound came through the line. Not a scream, not a word. A sharp intake of fear. Then the call went dead. Ridge was already at the door, growling into the dark. By morning, Brennan Locke had stopped pretending the world was ordinary. North Star Bay still wore its summer face. Sunlight spread over Lake Wren in bright silver ribbons. Children rode bicycles past white fences. Tourists carried paper cups of coffee down Main Street, smiling at sailboats and flower baskets, never guessing that fear could live behind locked windows and freshly painted doors. Brennan drove into town with Ridge in the passenger seat. The German shepherd sat upright, yellow-black coat brushed by the open window breeze, amber eyes fixed ahead as if the road itself had given him orders. His nicked ear twitched once when they passed Apple Row, but he did not whine. He had the solemn patience of a soldier waiting for the right door to open. Brennan wished he had the same patience. He had slept badly, if the broken scraps of memory could be called sleep. Lydia's call had ended too abruptly. Ridge had growled at the dark for nearly an hour afterward. Brennan had driven past Lydia's house twice before dawn, finding only the white porch, the locked windows, and no sign of struggle. Lights were on upstairs. Someone had moved behind the curtains. Alive then, but afraid. Fear left fingerprints, even when nothing was broken. The North Star Bay Records office stood beside the old courthouse, a brick building with tall windows and ivy crawling over one corner. It smelled of dust, warm paper, old varnish, and government patience. A ceiling fan turned lazily above the front desk, pushing the heat around without defeating it. Behind the counter sat Willa Trent. Willa was 54, compact and square-shouldered, with copper-brown hair streaked heavily with gray and cut bluntly at her chin. She wore narrow glasses on a chain, a pale green blouse buttoned too neatly, and the expression of a woman who had spent 3 decades watching people lie badly on public forms. Her skin was freckled, her hands quick, and her voice dry enough to sand wood. She looked up when Brennan entered with Ridge. "No dogs in records," she said. "Service-trained." "That dog wearing a vest?" "He refuses uniforms." Willa stared at him. Brennan stared back. Ridge sat politely and blinked. After 3 seconds, Willa sighed. "If he eats a birth certificate, you're paying the reproduction fee." "He has standards." "That makes one of you." Brennan almost smiled, but the weight in his chest dragged it down before it reached his mouth. "I need the Ferry fire records," he said. Willa's expression changed. Not much, just enough. Her fingers paused on the stack of forms before her. "That file is old." 12 years. "Old enough." "I'm not asking whether it's convenient." "No." Willa removed her glasses and cleaned them with a cloth. "Men like you rarely do." Brennan leaned one hand on the counter. "Men like me? Men who come in wearing silence like armor and think a file cabinet owes them peace." The words landed closer than he liked. Willa stood before he could answer. She was shorter than him by nearly a foot, but carried herself like someone taller out of pure irritation. "Wait there." She disappeared through a rear door. Brennan listened to drawers opening, metal rails scraping, paper shifting. Ridge stood and turned slowly, nose lifting. "What?" Brennan murmured. The dog looked toward the hallway behind the desk, not alarmed, interested. Willa returned with 2 cardboard file boxes and set them on a side table. Dust rose around them in a thin gray breath. Official incident report, council minutes, ferry maintenance notes, press clippings, insurance summaries. She tapped the second box. Some damaged material was moved to storage years ago. Flood in the basement, apparently. Apparently? Willa's mouth tightened. That is the word people use when no one wants to sign their name under the truth. Brennan looked at her more carefully. "You remember the fire." "Everyone remembers the fire." Willa's voice softened despite herself. "Flames high enough to turn the lake orange. Sirens from 3 towns. Children crying on the hill because they thought the whole pier would burn into the water." She glanced at Ridge, then away. "I remember your sister, too." Brennan went still. Willa opened the first box. "Tessa Locke came in here 2 weeks before it happened. Asked for property transfer records on the ferry company. Wanted copies of pier permits. She looked scared, but not helpless." Brennan's throat tightened. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I told Chief Harlan then." Willa's face hardened. He retired 6 months later and moved to Arizona. Records of that conversation never made it into the file. Of course they didn't. Brennan sat at the table. For the next hour, paper became a battlefield. The official report said the ferry's auxiliary fuel tank ruptured after an electrical failure. Tessa Locke and her daughter were listed among the unrecovered dead. Witness statements described smoke, screaming, confusion, and someone carrying a small child from the lower deck before disappearing into the crowd. That line made Brennan stop. Someone carrying a small child. He searched for the witness name. The statement had been withdrawn. No explanation. He turned another page. The fire department report jumped from page 6 to page 9. Missing pages. He found photographs from the scene. The ferry cabin blackened. The pier warped. Ash across the water like dark snow. One photo showed the rear side of the ferry, but the lower right corner had been cut away with scissors. Not torn, cut, deliberately. Brennan felt his pulse slow in the dangerous way it did before violence. Ridge rose from beneath the table. The dog walked to the second box, sniffed once, and shoved his muzzle under the loose lid. "Ridge," Brennan said. Willa looked over. "That box is damaged material, mostly junk." Ridge scratched at the side. Once, twice, then harder. Willa frowned. "Hey, careful." Brennan lifted the lid. Inside were warped newspapers, water-stained forms, brittle envelopes, and a smell of mildew. Ridge ignored most of it. His paw pressed against a bundle of old clippings tied with faded string. Brennan pulled it free. Something slipped out and struck the floor with a faint metallic sound. A small silver bracelet. For one impossible moment, nobody moved. Brennan bent and picked it up. It was a child's bracelet, tarnished black in the grooves, delicate enough to circle a wrist that had once held crayons, dolls, and his finger when crossing streets. Inside the tiny plate, barely visible beneath age and dirt, were 2 engraved letters. M.L. Mara Locke. The records room seemed to shrink around him. His breath left. He was no longer 44 in a brick building. He was 32 again, standing beside a closed casket that held no body, listening to people tell him grief had no need for proof. He remembered Tessa laughing in the garden, Mara asleep against his shoulder, a scar shaped like a crescent, a toy dog with one missing ear. Ridge pressed his head against Brennan's knee. The touch kept him from falling somewhere old and bottomless. Willa whispered, "That should not be here." Brennan opened the bundle with shaking hands. Beneath the clippings was a folded scrap of paper, stained along one edge. The handwriting was rushed, angled, familiar enough to cut him open. Tessa. Brennan, if you ever read this, do not trust the person who carried her off the ferry. He read it once, then again. The words did not change. They only became heavier. Willa's hand went to her mouth. "Lord have mercy." Brennan looked at the cropped photograph again, the missing corner, the hidden witness, the bracelet buried in discarded records. Then Ridge did something Brennan had never seen him do in public. The dog backed away from the table, lowered himself to the floor, and placed both paws over his nose. Not fear, not obedience. A trained search dog signal. Find. Brennan followed Ridge's gaze to the old photo with the missing corner. At the edge of the cut, barely visible, was the shadow of a hand holding something bright. A ring, a man's ring, large, square, dark stone. Brennan had seen that ring before, not on the ferry, not in any report. On Mayor Merritt Stone's right hand when he waved at Penny through Lydia's window. For a few seconds, Brennan could not hear the ceiling fan. He could not hear traffic outside or Willa breathing across the table. He heard only a child's three-note whistle in the town square and the voice of his sister from a voicemail he had never finished listening to. The rehook settled coldly in his bones. Ridge had not simply found a bracelet. He had pointed to the missing piece of a photograph, and the missing piece wore a ring belonging to the town's hero. Brennan carefully placed the bracelet, note, and photograph into an evidence envelope Willa provided with trembling hands. "You should go to the sheriff," Willa said. "Not yet. That is not a file you carry around like a grocery list. If I walk into the sheriff's office with this, before I know what it means, Merritt hears before sunset." Willa did not argue. That frightened him more. "What else disappeared?" Brennan asked. Willa swallowed. "The original passenger manifest, the coroner's addendum, 2 pages from the fire marshal's report, and a maintenance complaint filed 3 days before the accident." "Filed by who?" "Tessa." The name hit the room softly and stayed there. Brennan closed his eyes. For 12 years he had carried one version of his sister, frightened, trapped, calling him too late. Now another version stepped from the ashes. Tessa asking questions. Tessa filing complaints. Tessa leaving warnings in damaged records. Tessa trying to save someone, or hide something. That was the part Brennan did not want to touch. Because if Tessa knew danger was coming, why had she taken Mara anywhere near that ferry? Why had she left Brennan a message saying she had done something wrong? Why had she not called him sooner, harder, until he answered? The old guilt inside him shifted shape. It was no longer only the guilt of not answering. It was the terror that answering might have forced him to hear something he was not ready to forgive. By late afternoon, Brennan left the records office through the rear door. Willa watched from the window, face pale behind the glass. Ridge walked close, unusually quiet. At the cabin, Brennan placed the evidence envelope on the kitchen table. For nearly an hour, he did not touch his phone. It sat beside the lamp like a snake. The voicemail was still there. He had kept it through 4 phones, 2 service providers, and 12 years of pretending he did not know why. He had listened only to the beginning, always stopping after Tessa's broken voice said, "Brennan, I messed up." Because grief allowed certain cowardices and called them survival. Ridge came to him and rested his muzzle on Brennan's wrist. "No," Brennan whispered. The dog did not move. Brennan laughed once, without humor. "You think you get a vote?" Ridge blinked. Apparently, yes. Brennan picked up the phone. His thumb hovered over the saved message. The cabin was warm, but his hands felt cold. Outside, the lake glittered under the last light of day, beautiful and indifferent. A loon called somewhere across the water, lonely as a question. He pressed play. Static. A breath. Then Tessa's voice, younger than memory, raw with tears. "Brennan, I messed up." He almost stopped there. Ridge leaned harder against his leg. The message continued. "I thought I could fix it without dragging you in. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, they'd leave Mara alone. But they lied. God, Bren, they lied." A sob broke through. Brennan gripped the edge of the table. There was muffled noise behind her. Wind. Water. Maybe engines. Then Tessa whispered again, closer to the phone now, as if hiding. "I'm not dead in the fire, Brennan. Not yet." The room disappeared. His sister breathed shakily through the speaker. "But if they find the little girl before you do, let her hate me. Let her think I abandoned her. Let the whole town think I burned with that ferry." Another sound cut across the recording. A man's voice in the distance. Tessa gasped. Her final words came fast, broken, barely louder than prayer. "Just keep her alive." The message ended. Brennan sat motionless long after the phone went dark. Ridge lowered his head into Brennan's lap, and for the first time in 12 years, Brennan Locke understood that his sister's last call had not been a farewell. It had been an order. Brennan Locke did not sleep after hearing his sister's voice. He sat at the kitchen table until dawn. The old voicemail burned into the room like smoke that refused to leave. The phone lay dark beside his hand. The evidence envelope from the records office sat unopened again, though he knew every item inside now. The tarnished bracelet, the cropped photograph, the warning in Tessa's handwriting. Outside, Lake Wren brightened beneath a pale northern sunrise. It was almost offensive how beautiful the morning looked. The water flashed gold between the pines. Sparrows fought cheerfully near the woodpile. A breeze moved through the grass with the lazy confidence of summer. The world had no respect for a man discovering that 12 years of grief had been built on broken boards. Brennan pressed his palms against his eyes. If Tessa had survived the Ferry fire, where had she gone? If Penny Alder was really Mara Locke, why had she been raised under another name? And why had Tessa never come back for her daughter? That question hurt worst. Not because Brennan wanted to blame his sister, because some wounded part of him already did. Ridge lay across the bedroom doorway all morning, refusing to let Brennan disappear into the back room where old habits waited. The 5-year-old German shepherd kept his yellow-black body stretched across the threshold, his amber eyes open and solemn. He did not whine, he did not demand. He guarded. It was one of Ridge's crueler talents, Brennan thought, making loyalty look simple. "I'm fine," Brennan muttered. Ridge lifted one brow. "Don't start." The dog sighed through his nose, deeply unimpressed. By late morning, Brennan placed the evidence envelope inside his jacket and drove to Apple Row. Lydia Snow's white house looked peaceful beneath the apple trees. Sunlight dappled the porch. Bees moved drunkenly through the lavender planted near the steps. Blue curtains hung behind the locked windows, soft and domestic, as if no fear had ever breathed inside. But Brennan saw the difference today. One curtain moved, then fell still. Someone was watching. He knocked. A long silence followed. Then Lydia opened the door. She looked smaller than she had the day before. Her silver-gray hair was tied back, but loose strands clung to her pale cheeks. She wore a faded brown cardigan over a cream blouse, and her hands were wrapped around a dish towel, though there were no dishes nearby. Her lined face held exhaustion, fear, and something heavier than both, surrender approaching from far away. Ridge stepped onto the porch beside Brennan. Lydia looked at the dog first, then at Brennan. "You listened," she said. It was not a question. Brennan's jaw tightened. "Enough to know you've been lying to a child." Lydia closed her eyes briefly, as if the sentence had struck a bruise she already knew was there. "Yes," she said. "I have." The honesty left Brennan with nowhere to put his anger. Lydia stepped aside. "Come in before the neighbors decide my porch is a courtroom." Inside, the house smelled of apples, dust, lavender soap, and old wood warmed by sun. A narrow hallway led toward a bright kitchen. The rooms were neat, but not relaxed. There were too many careful habits, curtains tied just so, chairs angled toward doors, a key hanging high above the frame where a child could not reach it. Penny was not downstairs. "Where is she?" Brennan asked. "In her room." Lydia's voice softened. "Reading, I hope. Listening, probably. Children raised around secrets develop very good ears." Brennan did not sit when Lydia gestured toward the kitchen table. Ridge wandered slowly down the hallway, nose low. "Call him back," Lydia said quickly. Brennan watched the dog. "Why?" Lydia did not answer. Ridge stopped beside a narrow closet under the stairs. His ears lifted. He sniffed once, then lowered himself to the floor with his muzzle nearly touching the gap beneath the door. A sound escaped him. Not a growl, a low, wounded breath. Lydia's face drained of color. Brennan moved toward the closet. "What's in there?" "Nothing." Ridge pawed once at the door. "Lydia." The old woman gripped the back of a chair. Her knuckles turned white. "That is where she fell." The house seemed to hold its breath. "Who?" Brennan asked, though he already knew. Lydia's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Tessa." For a moment, even the sunlight through the kitchen window looked changed, thinner, colder, as if the past had opened its eyes inside the house. Lydia reached for a key hanging from a hook and unlocked the closet door. It creaked open. There was no dramatic shrine inside, no hidden photograph, no bloody cloth waiting like something from a cheap mystery. Only folded blankets, a box of winter boots, and a small patch of dark staining on the old floorboards near the threshold. Scrubbed nearly clean, still visible. Ridge pressed his nose to that spot and closed his eyes. Lydia covered her mouth. The rehook settled between them quietly but powerfully. Ridge had never been inside this house before, yet the dog had found the exact place where Tessa Locke, supposedly dead, had once collapsed with her child in her arms. Brennan looked at Lydia. "Tell me everything." Lydia did not argue this time. She sat at the kitchen table as if her bones had finally become too tired to hold the secret upright. "It was 3 nights after the Ferry fire," she began. "Rain had come in from the lake, hard rain, the kind that makes the whole town smell like mud and smoke." Her eyes fixed on the closet. "I heard knocking, not at the front door, the back. 3 short knocks, then 1 long. I almost didn't open it." "Why did you?" Lydia's mouth trembled. "Because someone was crying." Brennan sat down slowly. Ridge returned to his side but kept looking toward the stairs. "When I opened the door," Lydia continued, "Tessa was standing there, barefoot, hair half burned at the ends, 1 sleeve gone. She had burns on her forearm and smoke all over her face. She was holding Mara so tightly I thought the child was already dead." Brennan's hand tightened around the edge of the table. "She wasn't," Lydia said quickly. "Barely conscious, feverish, terrified, but alive." Brennan looked away, fighting the image. Tessa running through rain. Tessa carrying her daughter. Tessa coming to this house instead of his. The old wound inside him twisted. "Why you?" he asked. Lydia swallowed. "I taught Tessa in 6th grade. Later, after my husband died, she used to bring groceries when I was sick. We weren't family, but sometimes kindness builds a bridge people remember when the road burns behind them." "What did she say?" "She said someone wanted the child. She said Mara was safer if the world believed she had died." Brennan leaned forward. "Who wanted her?" Lydia's eyes lifted to him. "Merritt Stone." The name struck the kitchen like a thrown glass. Ridge's ears rose. Lydia continued before Brennan could speak. "Not only him. There were papers, names, money moving through relief funds after storms and fires. Children placed through unofficial channels in towns where records were easy to bend. Tessa found enough to understand that the Ferry fire was not just an accident." Brennan's voice went flat. "It was set." "I believe so." "Believe?" Lydia's eyes flashed, fear turning sharp. "Do not punish me because I had less proof then terror. The words stopped him. She breathed through the tremor in her hands. Tessa worked part-time filing records for the Ferry company that summer. She thought Merritt was only stealing grant money. Then she found names of children, foster transfers, adoption paperwork, some real, some not. She copied what she could. Brennan stood and paced once across the kitchen. His mind wanted clean enemies, monsters with fangs, men who announced evil plainly enough that decent people could shoot them and sleep afterward. But Merritt Stone smiled at ribbon cuttings, donated to school repairs, knew widows by name. That was worse. What did Tessa do after she brought Mara here? Lydia's face folded inward. She begged me to hide her, not for a day, not for a week, forever if I had to. And you agreed. I looked at that child breathing smoke into my quilt, and yes, Brennan, I agreed. The anger came then, hot and sudden. You changed her name. I saved her life. You let her grow up believing she was abandoned. Lydia flinched as if slapped. And what would you have had me tell her? She whispered. That her mother ran because powerful men wanted to use a 3-year-old as leverage? That every adult who smiled at her in this town might be connected to the reason she had nightmares? That her own name could put her back in danger before she was old enough to spell it? Brennan had no answer ready. That made him angrier. She should have called me, he said. She did. The words cut all movement from him. Lydia's eyes filled. Tessa called you again and again before she came here. She said your number went nowhere. Then a military contact finally told her your communication access was sealed because of a classified operation. Messages could be delayed, screened, held. Brennan felt the kitchen floor shift beneath him. No. Yes. I would have come. I know, Lydia said softly. So did she. Brennan turned away, hands on the counter, breathing like a man surfacing through ice. For 12 years, he had built a prison out of one belief, that his sister had called once and he had not answered. Now Lydia was telling him the prison had guards he had never seen. But relief did not come, only a different pain. If it had not been entirely his fault, then why did it still feel like punishment? Why didn't Tessa come back later, he asked. Lydia wiped her eyes with shaking fingers. Because she thought Merritt's people were watching me, watching the child. If she came back, she would lead them here. She said she could draw danger away if they believed she still had evidence. Did she? Lydia hesitated. Brennan saw it. What? I don't know what she kept. She wouldn't tell me everything. She said the less I knew, the safer Penny would be. At the sound of the name, a board creaked above them. Everyone froze. Ridge turned toward the stairs. Penny stood halfway down. Her face was white. Her braid hung loose over one shoulder. In one hand, she held the silver bracelet Brennan had left on the table without realizing it. The engraved plate caught the sunlight. M.L. Lydia rose so quickly the chair scraped the floor. Penny? The girl stared at her, then at Brennan. Her voice came out small, but not weak. Is that me? No one answered. That was enough. Penny looked down at the bracelet in her palm as though it had bitten her. My name isn't Penny? Lydia began to cry silently. Brennan took one step toward the girl. Listen to me. No. Penny backed away. Don't do that. Do what? Talk like adults talk when they already decided what a kid is allowed to survive. The words were too sharp, too true. She ran. Ridge moved instantly. Ridge! Brennan shouted. But the dog was already after her, not chasing like a hunter, but following like a guardian afraid the world had tilted under a child's feet. Brennan and Lydia ran after them. Penny cut through the orchard, past the lavender, through the side gate, and down the sloping path toward Lake Wren. Brennan's heart slammed against his ribs when he realized where she was going. The dock. The old wooden dock stretched into the water behind Lydia's property, silvered by afternoon light. Penny stopped near the end of it, breathing hard, the lake moving beneath her in small, bright waves. She was trembling, not from cold, from the terrible violence of becoming someone else while still standing in the same body. Ridge stood beside her, close but not touching, his tail low, his eyes lifted to her face. Brennan slowed before stepping onto the dock. "Penny?" She turned. Tears streaked her cheeks, but her chin was lifted with a dignity that hurt to see. She held up the bracelet. "If my mother loved me," she asked, voice breaking, "why did she let me grow up feeling like a child someone left behind?" The lake glittered around them. No one in the world had an answer gentle enough. Penny did not speak to Brennan for 2 days. Not really. She answered when Lydia asked if she wanted soup. She nodded when Marla Voss brought muffins and pretended not to notice the red around the girl's eyes. She even thanked Ridge once when the German shepherd sat quietly outside the porch instead of pushing closer. But when Brennan came near, Penny became still. Not frightened. Worse. Closed. She had the look of a child who had discovered adults could rearrange her whole life with sentences, then act surprised when she bled from the inside. Brennan understood that look too well. He had seen it in young recruits after their first impossible order, seen it in wounded men who survived a blast only to find the person they had been was still lying somewhere in the dirt. Penny Alder, or Mara Locke, or whatever name the truth might drag into daylight, had lost something without leaving Lydia's porch. She had lost the simple mercy of believing she knew who she was. On the third morning, Brennan found her behind Lydia's house, throwing small stones at an old stump near the apple trees. Ridge sat several feet away, watching her with solemn patience. His yellow-black coat shone under the summer sun, but his amber eyes remained fixed on Penny's face, not the stones. Brennan stopped near the gate. "I'm not here to make you talk." Penny threw another stone. It struck the stump and bounced off. "Good. I can leave." "Then leave." The words were sharp, but her voice trembled around them. Brennan rested his hands on the fence. "I know you're angry." That made her turn. "No, you don't." Her hazel green eyes flashed. "You know how to stand there like a sad mountain and make everyone think you understand pain better than they do." Ridge gave a quiet huff, as if unfortunately impressed. Penny pointed at the dog. "And you, don't look at me like that." Ridge lowered his head. Her chin wobbled, but she held it up. "Before you came, I was Penny. I sold flowers. I had a room. I had Lydia. I knew which memories were dreams and which ones were real." She swallowed hard. "Now everyone looks at me like I'm a ghost who came back wrong." Brennan felt the words enter him slowly. "I'm sorry," he said. Penny laughed once, bitter and small. "Adults love saying that after they break something." He deserved that, maybe more. Before he could answer, tires crunched along the gravel drive. A black town car rolled to a stop in front of Lydia's house. Ridge stood immediately. His body changed before Brennan's mind did. Ears sharp, shoulders lifted, tail still. The dog moved toward the porch just as Lydia stepped outside. Mayor Merritt Stone emerged from the car carrying a leather folder. He was dressed in a pale summer suit, crisp enough to look innocent beneath the apple trees. His silver hair was combed neatly back, and his handsome public smile sat perfectly on his face. Behind him stood a younger man Brennan had not seen before. The younger man was in his early 30s, narrow-shouldered, with sandy hair, pale skin, and nervous hands that kept adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He wore a county badge clipped to his belt, but his eyes avoided everyone's face. He looked less cruel than frightened, which in Brennan's experience was often how cruelty got its errands done. "This is Calvin Rourke from County Family Services," Merritt said pleasantly. "He is here merely as a witness." Calvin swallowed. "Just procedural." Lydia went rigid. "Merritt, don't do this." "My dear Lydia," Merritt said, placing one hand over his heart, "I have spent years not doing this." Brennan stepped from the side yard. "Doing what?" Merritt turned with perfect surprise. "Mr. Locke, how fortunate! I was just explaining to Miss Snow that certain paperwork regarding Penny Alder appears incomplete." Penny appeared at the corner of the house. Lydia moved instantly. "Go inside." "No," Penny said. Her voice was quiet, but it held. Merritt opened the folder. "There is no formal adoption record, no proper guardianship transfer, no hospital birth documentation under the name Penny Alder that withstands scrutiny." Lydia's face had gone pale. "You know why?" she whispered. "I know only what documents say," Merritt replied. "And documents, unlike grief, are useful." Brennan felt something old and violent wake behind his ribs. Merritt continued. "Unless Miss Snow agrees to cooperate with the county and relocate the child temporarily while records are reviewed, I'm afraid protective custody may become necessary." Penny's face emptied. Lydia grabbed the porch rail. Brennan moved before he decided to. One step, then another. His hands were loose at his sides. That was the dangerous part. Calm hands, quiet breath, eyes measuring distance. Merritt saw it. His smile widened a fraction. He wanted Brennan to be the weapon everyone feared. He wanted the ex-SEAL to explode in front of witnesses and prove exactly why Penny should be removed from Lydia's home. Brennan knew that. Knowing did not stop him. Then Ridge stepped in front of him. The German Shepherd did not face Merritt. He faced Brennan. Ridge planted himself between Brennan and the mayor, amber eyes locked on his master's face. Not pleading, commanding. Brennan stopped. "Move," he said under his breath. Ridge did not. Merritt watched with cold amusement. Brennan's right hand twitched. Ridge leaned forward and pressed his muzzle against Brennan's fist. The touch was gentle. It struck harder than any blow. For one suspended moment, Brennan saw what Ridge saw. Not justice, not protection, but a man about to let rage put Penny in more danger. The dog had not placed himself between Brennan and evil. He had placed himself between Brennan and the part of himself that evil was waiting to use. That was the re-hook life often gave without mercy. Sometimes the creature saving the child must first save the rescuer from becoming the proof against her. Brennan slowly opened his fist. Ridge stayed there another second, then turned toward Merritt with a low growl. Merritt closed the folder. "We will continue this discussion soon," he said. "I suggest everyone think carefully about what stability means for a young girl." He returned to the car. Calvin Rourke lingered just long enough to look at Penny. There was shame in his eyes. Then he followed. After the car disappeared, nobody spoke. Penny stared at Brennan. "You almost hit him." "Yes." "Would that have helped?" "No." "Then why did you almost do it?" Brennan looked at Ridge. "Because sometimes angry feels easier than afraid." Penny's expression shifted, not softened exactly, but changed, as if, for the first time, Brennan had given her an answer that did not pretend to be noble. That night, Ridge vanished. Brennan noticed at 9:17. The porch was empty. The path to the dock was empty. The cabin yard held only fireflies and warm darkness. He found Penny at Lydia's fence 10 minutes later, holding a flashlight. "He came here first," she said. "Then he left toward the hill." "You saw him?" "He looked back at me." Her voice tightened. "Like he wanted me to follow." Brennan did not like it, but Ridge had never wasted a gesture. They took the old path beyond Apple Row, climbing through fields where bluebells thinned into tall grass. Penny walked beside Brennan in silence at first, arms folded tight. The moon rose pale above the lake. Crickets sang in the weeds. Somewhere below, North Star Bay glowed with porch lights and lies. After a while, Penny said, "Did you love her?" Brennan knew who she meant. "Tessa?" Penny nodded. "Yes." "Was she good?" The question nearly stopped him. "She was human," Brennan said at last. "That's harder than good." Penny looked down at the path. "I don't know whether I'm supposed to miss her." "You don't have to know tonight." That answer seemed to surprise her. Ahead, Ridge barked once. They found him at the edge of the old Everly greenhouse. The place had been abandoned for years, but summer had dressed it beautifully from a distance. Sunflowers grew wild around the cracked glass walls. Vines climbed the iron frame. Moonlight silvered the broken panes until the whole structure looked like a cathedral built for forgotten plants. Inside, it smelled of dust, damp soil, and old sunlight trapped where no one had come to open the doors. Ridge led them down the center aisle, past overturned clay pots and dead irrigation lines. At the far end, beneath a row of dry sunflower stalks, he began to dig. "Ridge," Brennan whispered. The dog dug harder. Penny knelt beside him, bare hands pulling soil away until her fingers struck metal. Together they uncovered a small waterproof box. Brennan opened it with his pocket knife. Inside lay a notebook wrapped in oilcloth, a packet of photographs, a folded list of names, and a small cassette recorder sealed in plastic. Penny did not touch anything. Brennan lifted the notebook first. Tessa's handwriting filled the pages, messier than before, frightened, alive. There were names of children, dates, towns along the lake, false transfers, relief funds routed through shell charities, initials beside payments. Then Brennan opened the photographs. Merritt Stone stood near the old ferry pier with another man, broad and heavy, his face turned half away from the camera. They were exchanging an envelope. Penny pointed to the folded list. "Those are kids?" Brennan did not answer quickly enough. Her face crumpled. He found batteries in the recorder. Against every instinct of mercy, he pressed play. Static clicked. Then Tessa's voice filled the greenhouse, thin but unmistakable. "If Mara grows up believing I left her, let her hate me. Let her be angry. Anger means she lived long enough to ask why." Penny's mouth opened, but no sound came. The recording continued. "I was foolish. I thought I could gather proof and bargain with wolves. Brennan, if you find her, don't bring her back to me. Not unless I come clean first. Because by then, I may have become something even you can't rescue." The tape crackled, then stopped. Penny turned to Brennan, tears shining but not falling. "Is she alive?" Before Brennan could answer, Ridge spun toward the greenhouse entrance. A growl rolled out of him, deep and immediate. Brennan stood, pulling Penny behind him. Outside, among the wild sunflowers glowing under late moonlight, Merritt Stone stepped into view. He smiled. Then slowly, deliberately, he began to clap. Merritt Stone did not run when Brennan stepped between him and Penny. That was the first thing that made him dangerous. Guilty men often ran too soon. Cowards shouted. Thieves bargained with sweat on their lips. But Merritt only stood near the broken glass wall of the Everly greenhouse with moonlight on his silver hair, looking almost amused that Brennan had finally reached the part of the story where good men began making foolish choices. Ridge stood in front of Penny, his yellow-black body low, a growl trembling through his chest. Penny clutched the small recorder against her heart. The tape inside held her mother's voice, fragile, frightened, impossible. A voice that had crossed 12 years of silence, only to make the girl more lost than before. Merritt looked at the old greenhouse, the cracked panes, the dry sunflower stalks, the dirt still fresh from where Ridge had dug up the waterproof box. "Well," he said gently, "Tessa always did have a sentimental streak. Useful in a mother, dangerous in a witness." Brennan's hands curled. "Say her name again," he said, "and I'll make sure it costs you teeth." Merritt smiled without warmth. There it is, the decorated warrior reduced to a threat in a greenhouse. Penny stared at him. "You knew my mother?" Merritt's gaze moved to her, and for the first time the smile changed. Not guilt, not tenderness, appraisal. "I knew Tessa Locke before she decided she was holy. She was trying to stop you," Brennan said. Merritt gave a soft laugh. "Your sister worked for me, Mr. Locke. She filed papers, moved forms, took cash when she needed it. And she needed it often." Brennan went still. The words had been designed like a blade. Merritt stepped closer, careful to remain outside Ridge's reach. Medical bills, late rent, a child who got sick too easily, a brother overseas playing hero where she couldn't reach him. Tessa wanted to survive. Survival is rarely clean. Penny's face tightened. Brennan felt rage rise, but beneath it something worse opened. Doubt. Not doubt that Merritt was evil. Doubt that truth would leave anyone pure enough to mourn simply. "She found out what the papers meant," Merritt continued. "Children moved through false guardianships, relief money turned into private accounts, names changed where no one knew to look. At first, she told herself she was just stamping forms. Then she saw a child's photograph attached to the wrong file." Penny whispered, "So she helped him?" Brennan turned to her. "Penny, no." Her eyes were wet. "Did she?" Merritt answered before Brennan could. "She helped until she became frightened of her own reflection." Ridge barked once, sharp enough to crack the air. Merritt's eyes narrowed at the dog, but his voice stayed calm. "Truth is not a hymn, child. It is a fire, and when it spreads, it burns the innocent first." He pointed toward the box in Brennan's hand. "Give me the notebook and the tape. In return, Miss Snow keeps the girl. The county forgets the paperwork irregularities. Penny Alder remains Penny Alder. No reporters, no state investigators, no strangers digging through her childhood like dogs through garbage." Penny flinched. Brennan hated that Merritt knew exactly where to strike. "If I refuse?" Brennan asked. Merritt glanced toward Penny. "Then she becomes a case number. Her name, her blood, her mother's mistakes, all dragged into court. And your sister will not be remembered as a martyr. She will be remembered as a frightened woman who helped monsters until the monsters turned toward her crib." The greenhouse seemed to tilt. Brennan looked at Penny and saw the cost. Not an idea, not a moral lesson. A 13-year-old girl with dirt on her knees, holding a dead mother's voice in both hands. If he exposed the truth, Penny would be torn open before strangers. If he buried it, every child on Tessa's list would remain lost in paperwork, and Tessa's final courage would become another secret rotting underground. Merritt lowered his voice. "Be wise, Brennan. You can save the girl in front of you, or chase ghosts for children you do not know." For one terrible second, Brennan wanted to choose the smaller mercy. Then Ridge staggered. The German shepherd's growl broke. His front legs dipped as if the floor had moved beneath him. "Ridge?" Penny cried. The dog tried to stand again, but his body swayed. Brennan dropped beside him. Ridge's amber eyes were open, confused but fighting. Foam did not come. There was no convulsion. Only sudden weakness, a heavy tongue, and unnatural slackness in the powerful shoulders. Merritt looked down with mild regret. "I warned my driver not to leave food where animals could reach it. Sadly, dogs are trusting creatures when meat is involved." Brennan's vision went white at the edges. Penny made a sound that was almost not human. "You poisoned him." "Sedated," Merritt corrected. "There is a difference. I am not cruel without reason." That was the rehook. The town's beloved hero had not only threatened a child with law and reputation, he had silenced the dog first, because Ridge was the one witness he could not charm, bribe, shame, or rewrite. Penny knelt beside Ridge, shaking. The dog lifted his head just enough to press his muzzle against her wrist. That gesture broke something in her. She stood, small, trembling. 13 years old. But when she faced Merritt, she no longer looked like a girl waiting for adults to decide what truth she could survive. "You keep saying you can protect me with silence," Penny said. "Lydia did that. My mother did that. Everyone did that." Merritt's face hardened. Penny's voice cracked, but it did not fall. "I don't need one more grown man saving my life with a lie." Brennan looked at her. In that moment, he understood the thing he had been too afraid to name. Penny did not need him to choose for her. She needed him to stand close enough that when she chose, she would not stand alone. Brennan lifted Ridge carefully. The dog was heavy, warm, breathing. Merritt watched them move toward the greenhouse exit. "You walk away with that box," he said, "and I cannot promise what happens next." Brennan stopped beside him. "No," he said quietly. "That's your problem. You've spent too long confusing fear with promise." They drove straight to the county sheriff's office. Sheriff Brielle Knox was not what people expected from law in a postcard town. She was 47, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown skin, close-cropped black curls threaded with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of storm water over stone. A faint scar crossed one eyebrow, left from a winter highway rescue years earlier when a drunk driver clipped her patrol car and killed the deputy beside her. Since then, people said Brielle had become harder. Brennan thought she had become precise. She listened without interrupting. That alone set her apart from most officials. Her office smelled of black coffee, printer toner, and old rain jackets. A framed photograph of her late deputy sat on a shelf behind her desk. She looked at the notebook, the list of names, the photographs, the recorder. Then she looked at Penny. "Do you understand what happens if I open this formally?" Brielle asked. Penny sat in the chair beside Brennan, one hand resting on Ridge's back. The dog lay on a folded blanket on the floor, weak but breathing steadily after Brielle's dispatcher called a local veterinarian for emergency instructions. "No," Penny said honestly, "but I understand what happens if nobody does." Brielle's expression shifted. Not pity, respect. Calvin Rourke arrived 20 minutes later, pale and sweating, after Brielle had him brought in for questioning. Under the sheriff's steady pressure, his nervousness cracked. He admitted Merritt had asked him to prepare custody papers before any formal review. He had not known the full story, he said. He had only followed instructions. Brielle's reply was cold. People have hidden behind that sentence for centuries. By dawn, warrants were being drafted. By late afternoon, Merritt Stone had disappeared from his office. He did not flee town immediately. That would have looked guilty. Instead, he went where the cameras were, the ferry pier. North Star Bay was celebrating its annual Reopening Day, a cheerful summer festival marking the rebuilt pier. White tents lined the shore. Brass music played near the water. Children ate shaved ice under strings of blue flags. Tourists took photographs of the very place where a fire had once rewritten lives. Brennan stood near the edge of the crowd with Penny, Lydia, Brielle, and 2 deputies in plain clothes. Ridge should have stayed in the truck. He did not. The German shepherd, still weak from the sedative, pushed himself upright before Brennan could stop him. His legs trembled. His yellow-black coat looked dull under the bright afternoon sun, but his amber eyes remained clear. "No," Brennan whispered, crouching before him. "You've done enough." Ridge looked at him. There were no words in that gaze, and somehow there were too many. Brennan saw the answer there, ancient and stubborn. Some souls were not made to rest before the road ended. Some loved by walking beside you until their body could no longer pay the price. Penny touched Brennan's arm. "Let him come," she said softly. "He started this." Brennan swallowed. Together, they moved through the crowd. On the stage near the ferry ramp, Merritt Stone stepped up to the microphone in a navy suit and white shirt, looking every inch the generous guardian of North Star Bay. People clapped. Flags snapped in the lake wind. Sunlight flashed over the water. He raised one hand, smiling. Brennan saw the other hand, not holding a microphone, not holding notes. Merritt's fingers closed around a silver lighter. Its polished surface caught the sun like a small, wicked star. And Brennan recognized it from the old fire reports. The unclaimed lighter photographed near the ferry wreck 12 years ago, the one everyone had dismissed as debris. This time, Merritt had brought fire back to the pier. The first sign was not flame, it was smoke. A thin gray thread slipped from behind the old storage building beside the ferry pier, too small for the crowd to notice at first. Music still played near the water. Children still laughed with blue snow cones staining their mouths. Flags snapped brightly above the rebuilt dock, and Mayor Merritt Stone still stood on the stage wearing the calm expression of a man who had spent a lifetime convincing people that danger always came from somewhere else. Brennan Locke saw the smoke before the shouting began. So did Ridge. The German shepherd lifted his head, amber eyes sharpening through the weakness still dragging at his body. His yellow-black coat looked dull in the afternoon sun. His legs trembled from the sedative Merritt had used earlier, but the old instinct inside him rose like a bell in a storm. Brennan bent quickly. No. Ridge did not look at him. The dog looked toward the storage building. The structure sat behind the pier office, half hidden by festival tents and stacks of unused chairs. It was old, cedar-sided, sun-bleached, and officially empty. Brennan had passed it many times without thinking about it. Now Merritt moved toward it through the side crowd, no longer smiling. Sheriff Brielle Knox saw him too. She pushed through the crowd with 2 deputies at her side, tall and steady in her dark uniform, her close-cropped black hair glinting with silver at the temples. Her storm-colored eyes locked onto Merritt with the terrible patience of a woman who had finally been given enough truth to act. "Clear the pier," she ordered. At first, nobody understood. Then the storage building coughed smoke from its rear wall. A woman screamed. The music stopped. North Star Bay, dressed in blue ribbons and summer pride, turned toward the place where its old sin had begun breathing again. Merritt reached the side door first. Brennan ran. Penny ran after him. "Stay back!" Brennan shouted. "No!" Her voice was small against the crowd, but it did not break. Penny Alder, Mara Locke, maybe both, maybe neither yet, ran with her braid loose and her face pale, not like a child chasing danger, but like someone refusing to let adults drag her life into another locked room. Lydia Snow cried out from behind Brielle's deputies, one thin hand pressed to her mouth. The elderly woman looked as if 12 years of hiding had aged her twice in one afternoon. Brennan reached the storage building as smoke thickened around the door. Merritt had slipped inside. Brielle tried the handle and cursed. Locked. One deputy swung a fire axe from the emergency rack near the pier office, but the first strike only splintered the frame. Inside, something crashed. Then came the smell of burning paper. Brennan's blood turned cold. Not wood, not cloth. Paper. Records. The remaining proof. Ridge pushed past his leg. "No, Ridge!" The German shepherd did not go toward the door. That saved his life. Instead, he veered sharply around the side of the building, nose low, limping hard. Brennan followed because by now he had learned the sacred law of Ridge. When the dog ignored the obvious path was usually a trap. Behind the building, smoke rolled from a cracked vent near the ground. Ridge sniffed the rear wall, then stopped at a section of cedar boards half covered by old weeds. He pawed once at the dirt, then again, weakly but with purpose. Brennan dropped to his knees. There, beneath dried grass and a rusted drainage grate, was a narrow maintenance opening. Painted over, hidden, almost forgotten. Penny arrived breathless behind him. Ridge scratched beside the frame until one paw slipped over a carved mark in the wood. 3 short lines, then one long line. Brennan stared. It was the same rhythm as the family whistle. Penny saw it too. Her lips parted. For a moment, the smoke, shouting, and sirens fell away. The rehook came not as thunder, but as recognition. Tessa had known this passage existed. Years ago, before she vanished into myth and guilt, she had left a sign only family might understand. 3 short marks and one long, carved beside the way out. "She was here," Penny whispered. Brennan's throat tightened. Yes. Not a saint, not a ghost, not a perfect mother. A frightened woman who had still thought ahead. Brennan tore at the grate until old screws snapped loose. Brielle rounded the corner with a deputy. "Lock!" "Back access," Brennan said. "Small. Smoke's pulling out here. There's airflow." Brielle understood immediately. "Then there's a path through." Brennan turned to Penny. "You stay with Lydia." Penny shook her head. "No. This isn't bravery. It's fire." "I'm not going in," she said, though tears had filled her eyes. "But don't tell me to disappear while you find the truth about my life." That stopped him. Behind her, Ridge stood swaying. Brennan placed one hand on the dog's head. "You stay." Ridge leaned into his palm for half a second. Then, with all the dignity of a disobedient angel, he lowered himself beside the maintenance opening and stared into it. Brennan understood. The dog had brought them to the door. The rest was human work. Brennan crawled through first. Smoke scraped his throat. Heat pressed against his face. The crawl space opened into the rear of the storage building, behind stacked crates and old ferry equipment. Fire crawled along one wall, eating shelves of file boxes. Merritt stood near a metal cabinet, shoving folders into a barrel already glowing with embers. He turned when Brennan rose from the smoke. For the first time, Merritt looked afraid. Not of Brennan's strength, of being seen. Outside, the festival crowd had moved back, but not away. People watched through smoke and open cracks in the wall. The whole town was there. Marla with flowers still on her apron. Willa Trent pale beside the pier office. Calvin Rourke shaking behind a deputy. Lydia gripping Penny's shoulders. Brielle at the rear opening with her weapon drawn. Merritt grabbed a small black safe from beneath the cabinet. Brennan lunged. They collided against a table. Merritt swung a metal folder tray into Brennan's shoulder. Pain flashed white, but Brennan held on. He did not strike him the way rage wanted. He drove him backward, controlled and brutal enough to end the struggle without giving Merritt the gift of becoming a victim. The safe slipped from Merritt's hand. Penny's voice rang from outside. "Brennan, left!" A shelf collapsed. Burning folders scattered across the floor. Brennan kicked them aside and seized the safe with one hand, then grabbed a canvas document bag from the cabinet with the other. Brielle came through the rear opening, coughing. Her deputies broke the front door at last. Fresh air rushed in. The smoke shifted. Merritt tried to run toward the crowd. He did not get far. Brielle caught him at the threshold in front of half of North Star Bay. The man once praised as the savior of the pier fell to his knees with ash on his suit and soot on his hands. No grand speech could save him. No smile could explain the burning records behind him. Brielle cuffed him while the town watched. That was how Merritt Stone ended, not in a duel, not in darkness, but in daylight, seen clearly at last. The safe was opened at the sheriff's office 2 hours later. Inside were original Ferry redevelopment records, adoption transfer documents, payment ledgers, and a smaller envelope wrapped in wax paper. On the front, in Tessa's handwriting, was one name: Mara. Nobody moved when Penny took it. Brennan stood beside her. Lydia sat nearby, crying silently into a tissue. Ridge lay on a blanket under the table, alive but exhausted, his head resting on Brennan's boot. Penny opened the letter. Tessa's words were not beautiful in the way people expected final words to be. They were uneven, frightened, and painfully human. "My sweet Mara, if you are reading this, then someone has finally brought you close enough to the truth to hurt you. I am sorry. I know sorry is a poor blanket, but it is the only one I have left to offer. I made choices I cannot dress up as noble. I was afraid. I trusted the wrong people. I helped move papers before I understood those papers were children. When I understood, I tried to stop it too late. If you hate me, let that hate keep you standing until something softer can grow beside it. I did not leave because I stopped loving you. I left because men who wanted silence knew your name." Penny stopped reading aloud there. Her face did not crumple. Not yet. Some grief was too large to enter all at once. It had to stand outside and knock. Later, on the courthouse steps, with reporters held back by Brielle and the lake turning pink under sunset, Penny asked Brennan the question he had not known he feared. "Do I have to be Mara now?" Brennan looked at her, this girl with 2 names, 2 histories, 1 scar, and a heart no adult had managed to protect without damaging. "No," he said. Her eyes searched his face. He crouched so he would not tower over her. "You don't have to become a dead girl just to make grown people feel forgiven. You get to choose who you are. Penny, Mara, both. Neither for a while, if that's what you need." Penny looked toward Lydia, then toward Ridge. The dog opened one tired eye. Penny almost smiled. Ridge survived that night, but surviving was not the same as returning. Over the next weeks, summer softened around North Star Bay. The bluebells bloomed thick along the shore. The pier reopened without speeches. Merritt Stone's name came down from the plaque at the ferry office. The investigation spread beyond the town, finding other children, other papers, other adults who had spent years mistaking silence for safety. Penny stayed with Lydia. On weekends, she visited Brennan's cabin. At first, she said it was because he had better tools and worse cooking. Then she admitted she wanted to learn how to repair boats. Brennan taught her how to sand weathered wood, how to listen for rot beneath a hull, how to tie knots that held without strangling what they held. Ridge watched from the porch. He grew weaker quickly, not dramatically. That would have been easier in some cruel way. Instead, his strength left like tidewater slipping from shore. One morning, he no longer followed Brennan to the dock. Another day, he refused sausage, which Brennan accused him of doing only to be theatrical. Ridge blinked slowly, as if to say theatrics were a human disease. 3 weeks after Merritt's arrest, Brennan and Penny sat with him beside the lake. No storm came, no rain, no darkness. Only a bright northern morning, bluebells bending in the grass, sunlight touching the water, and Lydia standing quietly near the path with one hand pressed to her chest. Ridge lay between Brennan and Penny, his yellow-black coat dulled with age and strain, his amber eyes still clear. Penny leaned close. Then she whistled the 3-note call, softly, 3 short notes and 1 breath of silence after them. This time, Ridge did not rise. He only looked at her. His tail moved once against the grass. Brennan placed his hand on the dog's head. "Good boy," he whispered, though the words were much too small for what Ridge had been. The German shepherd exhaled, a peaceful breath, a final answer. And then he was still. Months later, a wooden sign stood near the rebuilt ferry pier, carved by Brennan's own hands. For the lost, the found, and the ones who waited without knowing why. Penny still lived with Lydia, but every Saturday she came to Brennan's cabin to work on boats, drink lemonade too sour for any reasonable person, and argue with him about music. Brennan no longer hid from town. He still carried grief, but grief had changed. It no longer stood over him like a jailer. It walked beside him like an old scar that predicted rain. One evening, as the lake shone gold beneath the setting sun, Penny stood beside Brennan at the dock. "Do you think Ridge knew who I was from the beginning?" she asked. Brennan looked across the water, bright as an ancient shield washed clean after battle. "No," he said gently. "I think Ridge knew you were hurting." Penny waited. Brennan smiled faintly. And for him, that was enough. Sometimes the miracles God sends do not arrive with thunder, bright lights, or answers we can understand right away. Sometimes they come quietly, through a dog who refuses to leave a hurting child alone, through a truth that waits years to be found, through one brave heart finally choosing honesty over fear. Ridge never spoke a single word, yet he reminded everyone in North Star Bay of something many of us forget in everyday life. Love does not always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes God places someone beside us to guide us back when we are too lost, too angry, or too tired to find the way on our own. Maybe there is someone in your life who needs forgiveness. Maybe there is a truth you have been afraid to face. Or maybe, like Brennan and Penny, you are still learning that healing does not mean forgetting the pain. It means letting love stand beside it. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from and whether you believe God sometimes sends help through unexpected souls. And if you enjoy emotional stories about loyalty, faith, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing more stories like this. May God bless you, your family, and every heart still waiting to be found.